Pop punk is the beautiful fusion of the catchy, broad appeal of pop and the youthful, energetic rebellion of punk. Naturally, this allows for a broad spectrum of sounds and allows for endless debate of what the spectrum looks like exactly. If on one end you have pop and on the other hand you have punk, where are the endpoints that define pop punk and where do certain bands fall within those limits? Sometimes a band will stick firmly, defiantly, and loyally in the punk side of this spectrum. But why do many bands tend to start on that side of the spectrum, the punk side, and move over to the pop side? Trophy Eyes is the perfect case study of a band that went from one side to the other. They went from selling a full-bodied and heavy flavor of pop punk to selling a lighter, diet pop punk. They are hardly the first band to make this move though. Green Day might be the most famous pop punk band to travel from the punk side to the pop side of punk, and to great commercial success too. They went from playing to nobodies to producing Dookie, an album that sold so many copies that some of their more jealous contemporaries deemed that Green Day wasn't actually punk. And here we have arrived at why genre classifications are impossible, if not stupid. It's subjective. That's why personally I like to compare bands on this spectrum, rather than lumping bands into black and white categories like is punk or isn't. The truth is, many bands want to keep the street cred of being punk, because somehow making it and becoming mainstream are negative connotations to have for your band. It doesn't matter how hard you worked. Now you're eating from a silver spoon, and those bands from your formative years resent you for it. In 2014, Trophy Eyes released their first album, Mend Move On, an aggressive, emotional debut that planted them firmly on the punk side of the pop-punk spectrum. And then Trophy Eyes' second album came along. Chemical Miracle is not a huge departure from its predecessor, but there is a noticeable change. They managed to avoid the basement-dwelling gatekeepers who would accuse them of selling out and abandoning their fan base because they stepped ever so slightly out of their established sound. But as we all know, small incremental changes over time eventually add up to a big noticeable change until what you started with looks nothing like what you ended up with. Enter Trophy Eyes' 2018 release, The American Dream, an album that should be praised for its songwriting and introspection, an album with diverse tracks that take the listener on an emotional journey from start to finish, an album that refuses to retread the ground that Trophy Eyes already has. Many people, myself included, think that this album is one of the best that the genre has to offer. However, just as many people also criticize it for what it's not. It's not Chemical Miracle Part 2. It's their least aggressive album to date. It's got the cleanest production of any Trophy Eyes album so far, and John's singing actually sounds good in this album. What's a real shame, and something that does irk me when a band shifts their sound significantly, is they stop playing their old songs live. Trophy Eyes hardly touches anything pre-Chemical Miracle on tour anymore. I get it from the band's standpoint. They want to promote the new shit. But when bands go so far as to say, yeah, our old stuff is garbage, or we're embarrassed that we wrote those songs and we're not going to play them, the Mend Move On crowd feels left behind. That sound is gone. Trophy Eyes left it in the dust for a shinier, polished sound with broader appeal. This leads to a bitterness in that old fan base and a toxicity amongst public discourse. A hook baited by disgruntled fans that, if swallowed, causes the fans and the artists to turn their backs on each other. So why make this shift at all? Of course, bands are going to evolve. Rarely will you see a band who vocally says that their goal is to make the same music over and over, intentionally or not. But if bands are always changing their sound and reinventing themselves, how come there aren't as many bands that move in the other direction towards the more punk side of the spectrum? I think the answer to that becomes clear when you lay another graph on top of this spectrum. When a band moves towards pop, they are at the same time broadening their appeal. More listeners, bigger venues, more streams, more exposure, more dollars. Not always. Sometimes that plan backfires and they create something so commercial and soulless that nobody ends up liking it. But that's a story for another video. Thanks for watching.